I am your host, Andrew Monahan. Our guest today is Paul Lewis, founder and CEO at Calamu. Paul, welcome to Sales Bluebird.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.
I'm looking forward to our discussion, Paul, because you've got a rich history of being an entrepreneur, being a founder, leading companies, and now you're in a segment of the market that is very interesting to me and the things that you got going on there. So I'm looking forward to understanding how you approach this as one of the many companies that you started over the years and what you've learned about how to do it effectively, so we can inspire other potential founders or other founders going through the process right now to really grow and go about changing the world as we're all trying to do. But Paul, before we get to the business side of this, let's get to know you a little bit. I've got a list of 35 questions here. Can you pick three random numbers between 1 and 35, and I'll read out the question?
So my lucky number is 2, so let's do 2, 12, and 22.
There you go. I love that. So number 2, favorite action movie of all time?
Oh gosh, favorite action movie. I mean, I'm gonna have to go with Last of the Mohicans. Maybe not everybody considers that to be an action movie, but I think there was a lot of action that was in that movie and a lot of lesson in that movie as well. So I'm gonna go with that. Maybe a corny answer, but that's my answer.
I remember the movie. I don't remember the details. It's quite a few years since I've seen it, but I do remember there's a lot of action and some of it's a little bit gory as well, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I think some hard life lessons. But if you haven't seen the movie, go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, number 12 is early bird or night owl?
A little bit of both. So when I'm a night owl, I'm not going to be an early bird the next day. But I don't really follow a format. Sometimes I work way into the wee hours of the morning, and other times I'll get up at 4 a.m. and just kind of pick up and go.
Very good. All right. And 22 is, what's the most used app on your phone?
Gosh, I'm gonna say iMessages. I'm gonna have to say with iMessages, or find my iPhone, because I have 4 kids and I'm kind of always tracking them down and watching where they are. So I think between the two of those.
Find their iPhones. Where are they? Where in the neighborhood are they? We find that a lot. Like, which house are they at right now? I get both of those actually. That's same for me probably. Paul, going back to early days, how did you first make money as a kid?
I was kind of that kid that always wanted to have the lemonade stand, or was always offering myself out for services, cleaning garages, shoveling driveways, snow off driveways, just anything that I could do. I just had this entrepreneurial bug to try to see if I could work hard and convert that into cash. And it was just fun money for me.
Fun money. Very good. And then what was your first real job when you went into the big bad world?
My first real job was an internship that I had when I was in college, and it was with AT&T. And AT&T is a great company, but I noticed right away. So the summer that I was working at AT&T, you walk in the door at 8:30, and then you take a coffee break at 10:15, and then you have lunch at 12, and then 4:15 you start winding down for the day, and then everybody kind of walks out together. And I said, if I've got to do this for the rest of my life, I am not going to make it. I can't do this. I can't be this regular creature of habit. Didn't know it then, but that was, I guess, the first indications that I was really an entrepreneur.
And what did you do at college? What was your major?
My major in college was computer science, and actually launched my first business while I was in college.
That's interesting. So you got the technical background, but you've been a kind of business founder, entrepreneur for many years after that.
Yep. So formal education in the technology, and then School of Hard Knocks for the business side.
The real education out there in the world.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that then. So you founded 6 companies, you sold 2. And a few years back, you founded Calamu. Take us back to that moment, that point in history. Where were you? What was the thing that said, we should probably do something about this? What was that moment for you?
So I've been in security my entire career. And back when I had this moment, I was on the services side. So I was doing data forensics and incident response for global corporations and companies that were breached, and no shortage of companies that were being breached. This is 10 years ago, and we still have the problem. It's magnified even today. But back around 10 years ago, it really bothered me that we've got all of these great technology companies and all of these layers of defense, but somehow the bad guys are still winning. And I really spent a lot of time thinking about how do we turn the tables on the bad guys. Um, and the moment of inspiration really came to me is, one night I'm sitting on my front porch, as I did often, after dinner, and got the kids down, and uh, my wife would be inside doing something, and I would just sit out there and kind of think about and brainstorm, how do we solve this problem? When my dog, who was sitting at my side, got up and literally picked up his bone and trotted across the street and dug a hole in the neighbor's yard and put his bone in the neighbor's yard and came back, and I could swear he was smiling at me in the moonlight, but it dawned on me. I said, we've got to figure out how we could put our data in the public domain. He just put his most prized possession in the public domain, and he's fine with the security. And that was really the inspiration of the shift in mindset that I needed to figure out, how do we look at things differently? Incidentally, my dog, who's up in doggy heaven now, his name was Calamucci. And in his honor, I named the company Calamu, which was his nickname.
Oh, I love that. But you were in an instant response world, it sounded like, in your job at the time, right? So you were just seeing these issues again and again and again. And you kind of sitting there, I imagine, saying, there must be a better way.
So it was all about, with incident response, it's how quickly do you understand that you have a problem and how quickly can you recover from that problem? So it's T plus something. And I was trying to figure out, how do we make it T minus something? So instead of putting the loaded bank money in the bank bag for the thief and waiting for them to steal it and then opening it and getting sprayed with ink, how do we prevent the thief from getting it in the first place? And and that's what Calamu is about. So instead of trying to help companies after they got attacked, I wanted to try to help companies before they got attacked or during the attack and have them just brush it off.
So one of the things I'm interested in, Paul, is, you get that moment that says, okay, yeah, I've got a thing I need to probably do some research and get into it. But how do you actually start, though? What's the first thing? Do you go and hire a couple of developers? Do you got a buddy that you know that would work on it with you? What's the next couple of steps you go through?
Well, so the first thing I did is I was actually leading the cyber group at a consulting company in New York City. And the first thing I did is I went to the CEO and I said, hey, I have this really great idea. I don't really think it aligns with this company, but I want to disclose it. So I wanted to make sure that, I didn't want to do anything secretive. I wanted everything to be above board. So I got the whole thing carved out of my employment agreement with HR, which I think is a really important first step if you're working somewhere else. And then I also had his endorsement, the CEO's endorsement. He was actually my first investor in the company. First thing I did was a lot more research. I searched for intellectual property and patents and was surprised that I couldn't find anything, but I'm just an amateur doing this research. And I filed a patent. And I filed a patent on the initial concept and the initial technology and didn't really think much of it. I was excited about it, but I kind of thought that the patent office was going to come back and say, nice try, but there's 1,000 other patents similar to this. And this was, by the way, this was invented 80 years ago. And I was kind of expecting that kind of response. But the patent was issued. And in the meantime, I had filed a second patent. And when the second patent was issued and I got the notification, I went back to my CEO and I said, I got to jump. This is my sign, and I got to kind of go all in on this. And I told you I have 4 kids. At the time, I had 3 kids in college. So difficult financial decision when you've got a lot of expenses. But I kind of know me, and I know that if I don't go all in, then I'm not going to do a good job. So you gotta jump off the cliff with both feet.
And then did you hire some developers to start working, or did you know enough to code yourself?
So I know enough to code a little bit myself. I used to be a lot better in the good old days, like the Turbo Pascal days. But what I did was I first, for proof of concept, I hired an offshore development team with my own money, just to make sure that this whole thing could actually work and function. And when that came back positive, I said, okay, I'm gonna fund this a little bit further and hire some domestic contractors to start from scratch, because I just felt uncomfortable with the security product that I offshored just to somebody I found on the internet, and they didn't really know what the big grand scheme was, but so there was enough of a secret there, but I wanted to kind of start all over with coding, which I did. Built out kind of a proof of concept or a basic MVP, and then at that point, I started talking to potential customers, but it was still really early on, and also started talking to angel investors about funding, providing additional funding.
So at that point there, you're guiding the contractors, but you've got two prongs. I need to get my first customers, and I need to get some money, some investment as well.
Yeah.
Was it tough to juggle all that at the same time, or did it come pretty naturally?
No, I mean it's tough to juggle, right? I mean there's a lot of stress with this whole thing, right? So, this was very early in 2019, and now I'm all in, right? And I have no income, and I'm spending my own money, and I've got kids that I'm paying their tuition for, and when I finally got it to a point where I said, okay, now this all makes sense. Let me let me really lean in and go to the investment community. That was the beginning of 2020. So now we all know what happened in March of 2020, which was bad timing for me. But I had to persevere. I had to go on. I had to move forward, and did.
And then, as you were doing all that, was there a moment in the progress where you thought, I don't know if it's going to work out? Right? There, you got some barriers in your way, or something came up. Was there that moment in the process?
It's I have a lot of scars, so I know it's never easy, and it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot more work than most people think. But I always believed in the mission. I always believed in the outcome. I'm 100% committed to solving this problem and trying to make the cyber world a safer place, which is desperately needed. So this was not about necessarily building a successful business and making a lot of money, but it was more about trying to solve this problem. And I'm very focused on that.
We'll come back to that in just one second. Final question about the starting up process. You mentioned there people might not realize how tough it is. What's the big misconception people have about starting a cybersecurity company?
Well, starting any company takes fundamentals, right? And at the end of the day, it comes down to you got to be cash flow positive. Like you got to figure out how you're gonna how this thing is going to make money. So I think what I've seen is if people go into the process if their goal is like to try to make money, you probably shouldn't do that at all, right? And I advise people that have a great idea and they want to make a gazillion dollars. I'm like, well, I don't try to start a business then, because I don't think it's going to, that can't be your goal. You have to really be going after solving a problem. So, I think the biggest misconception or the biggest mistake is people don't go into it trying to solve a problem. And then if they're not trying to solve a problem, they're not going to stay in it and persevere and go through the ups and downs.
Okay. Yeah, I love that actually. That's a good point. So let's talk about Calamu then. If I was a CISO and let's say this is weird, but I'm only 12 years old, how would you answer my question? What does Calamu do?
Calamu protects your data in a way that no other product can protect it today. There's a lot of companies that keep the bad actor out of your data by protecting the systems that house your data. So the whole world is we've kind of built this security mentality that we're trying to protect the systems rather than protecting the data, which is really what's of value and really what the bad guy wants. So Calamu kind of shifts that. And instead of protecting the systems, we start with the premise that the bad actor has reached the data and we protect the data itself. All other systems have been bypassed at that point.
So in all contexts of the data, or it's a mobile or a database or in the cloud, or do you have certain aspects you focus on?
Well, one day we're gonna be all data, and that's our mission, that's our goal. But today we work very well on unstructured data and data at rest, and data in motion in a static format. So not transactional data, not database, although that is on our roadmap. But today we work very well with unstructured data.
And to get technical just for a second, when you say protect it, are you encrypting it or are you somehow controlling access to it?
So we've been called encryption on steroids, and what we're doing is we transform the data using multi layers of encryption and fragmentation and some other things. We transform and geodisperse the data so that if a system is compromised and data is removed, the attacker only gets valueless digital sludge. They don't get anything of value. They don't get any real data. they only get a subset of the data. So they only get kind of encrypted fragments of encrypted data. They don't even know that they don't have all the pieces necessary to put it together. So it's geo-dispersed, kind of combining physical security and cybersecurity to really confuse the bad guy.
That sounds interesting. I've heard of this concept before. And I'll tell you, every time I've heard of it, my my thought is you got to have some really smart engineers to figure out how to do that really well because the demands on people getting the data again, it's got to get back to where someone needs to consume it pretty quickly and in a state where someone could use it, right?
It's got to be near real time, right? I mean, and as we work towards fully transactional data, we're talking about, microsecond access to the data. So we've spent a lot of time and energy, not only on the security, but on the efficiency and how do we do this in a very expedient manner. And using cloud storage, right? So we've got bandwidth is always a constraint as well. But I have some really, really smart engineers that are very much up to the challenge and have accomplished some incredible hurdles. And yeah, we're moving forward.
That's awesome. What sort of companies and what sort of people does this resonate with the most?
But one of our biggest challenges is you can't boil the ocean, right? So you have to start somewhere. This problem, though, is a ubiquitous problem. Every company has the problem of data exfiltration or ransomware attacks or data manipulation. Every company has that problem. So where we're focusing our attention is where we're going to get, where we're getting the quickest early traction, and that is around sensitive data, right? So the most sensitive data. So think financial services or think uh, health records, things along those lines. So information that if it is leaked to the public would have a devastating effect, not only on the owner of the data, but who the data is also about.
Yeah, I get that. Um, when a prospect first sees the product, what's the thing that makes them go, wow, that is cool. That's going to be impactful for me?
I'm really proud to say that that happens all the time, right? So it doesn't happen half the time. It doesn't happen a third of the time. It actually happens all the time. And when we get to the point where we show our process and kind of show our secret sauce on how we're geo distributing the data in a redundant manner, first off, we usually get, wow, why didn't I think of that? Or wow, that's like so eloquent that it's simple. Or wow, how come the whole world isn't already doing this? So we do get a lot of wow factor with the process.
But I bet you get pretty quickly thereafter the questions, well, how and they're thinking in their minds how this is not gonna work for them sometimes, right? What about this and what
Well,
about that? What's our questions usually get?
yeah, I mean, they try to poke holes in, what if your credentials are stolen and someone logs in through the Calamu portal? And I'm like, well, if it's not you, it's not, if they're using your credentials, if someone walked up to me right now and hit me in the back of the head with a bat, they have access to my computer, right? So whatever is open, they have access to. Now we have some cool things that we're working on that actually will prevent even that. So stop that from happening. But they're not ready. They're not ready for prime time today. But yeah, companies try to poke holes. We used to use the term we have a breach proof solution, and that would get us a lot of meetings, and it would get a lot of debate, like right off the bat. Like, how can you say breach proof? Immediately putting us on the defensive. So we've softened our marketing messaging a little bit. But we still get a lot of disbelief as we're talking about the benefit. And then when we show the process, they're like, wow, yeah, you're right. Like this does work.
Oh, I love that. Tell me about the day that you won your first real live paying customer at Calamu.
Like a lot of startup companies, software companies, you have a product that you're dying to have somebody prove that there's value to it by paying you money for it, right? And you install it and you kind of have your fingers crossed that it's even going to get through the installation process. And you know that there are bugs that you haven't identified yet. And you never know really where that tipping point is, where you go from just doing demos until you get to someone that says, okay, I'll pay you money for it. And we got to that point about a year ago. Well, we closed our first sale a little over a year ago, and it just felt great that we kind of celebrated that we now have somebody that believes enough in us to open up their pocketbook and pay us money for something that we created out of nothing. So very gratifying.
And was the whole company waiting for the PO to come in? Were they expecting it and ready to celebrate?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And then we did celebrate. We actually celebrated more when the money hit the account because we said, hey, this is the first time we ever had money come into our account.
I love that. I remember years ago when I was in sales, I used to think that the moment of money coming in or getting POs was a big thing for sales. But then I hung out with some developers one time, and they said no, it's really important for them as well because it shows I'm working on stuff that's so valuable that big companies will actually pay money for this, and that's a gratifying thing for them. And it's something I never thought of back in the day. So let's move on to the sales team, Paul. Tell us about your sales team right now and how they're structured.
So we're kind of multifaceted, right? So we have a combination of a direct sales effort. We're also marketing and selling to the channel, and then we're also looking at strategic partnerships as well. So we're still figuring that part out, right? So I'm not sure if we're going to be a direct sales. It will ultimately be a direct sales model. So we're kind of trying a few different things, and we have folks that are covering each of those things in small teams on each of those things, and we're going to see which one is going to make the most sense for us to scale.
Okay, so you're trying different channels and seeing which one's going to get the most traction quickest, right?
Our biggest problem is it's a ubiquitous problem, right? So the total addressable market is gigantic. And I know that's no excuse, right? Everybody thinks the total addressable market is gigantic, but in this case, it really is everybody. So we're trying to figure out what is going to be how do we most effectively conquer this problem in the best possible way. So we're actually talking to super large enterprise, and we're having very engaging discussions with very large global enterprise, all the way down to SMB. And there's no shortage of attention across the whole spectrum. In fact, I don't want to be a consumer play, but we've also been questioned. Hey, this would be a great consumer play where you can actually protect end user data or endpoint data, which is true. But we have to focus. So we're trying our experiments on the direct sales side from SMB to mid tier to enterprise. We're getting the most attention really on both sides of the bell curve. So on the SMB side and on the large enterprise side, not so much in the mid tier. They're either moving slowly or they think they've got it kind of covered a different way. But one of the things that we solve for is ransomware. And in SMB, a lot of companies are terrified of ransomware, don't even know really how to approach it or how to, what they need to do with it. On the large enterprise, they're concerned with ransomware, but they're really more concerned about the data exfiltration or the double extortion part of ransomware. So two different value props. And then my guess is mid-tier kind of thinks they've got everything covered, or they don't have budget, or they don't want to go for a different change in strategy, or they already have sunk cost in what they've deployed and have to hope and keep their fingers crossed that doesn't get breached. But kind of interesting, what we're learning. On the channel side, we're seeing a lot of activity because the channel sees this as a definite add-on, right, and a definite value add for them servicing their clients. And then on the partner side, which is really most appealing to me, we have large companies that could have a very strategic play by implementing the Calamu process into something that they've got already deployed.
And when you say the channel, is that the traditional security channel you're talking about, or have you got a different channel?
MSP.
Oh,
MSP.
Okay.
Yep. So yep. So the folks that take care of your network and that sort of thing, all the security around it.
So, Paul, if you could wave your magic wand and fix one thing for your sales team right now, what would that be?
I think it's awareness of a different way to approach the problem. We've all the whole world kind of has been programmed. You go to RSA and Black Hat and all the security conferences where we've got, I like to say we have 3,000 companies selling the same 10 things. And with no discredit to, we need those 10 things. They're desperately needed, but they're all about really layered security and how do we detect a problem quickly and how do we react to a problem quickly instead of really going to the heart of the problem, which is let's protect the data and make the data useless and valueless if something happens, if the data leaves your system. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would have the whole world have that little tiny nugget of education that let's not build another moat. Let's protect the crown jewels, to use an old analogy.
Yeah, I would imagine there's people out there who are probably already thinking about things like that. Maybe not specifically how you're doing it, but their philosophy is, data, and their philosophy is there must be a way to do this differently than before. Have you found people that are already thinking like that, or is it all just education?
No, the whole world is thinking about it, but the whole world is kind of a step behind, I think, in my opinion. So we're looking at things like immutable storage, which solves part of the problem. We're looking at air gapping your data, which kind of solves part of the problem as well. But, immutable and air gapped doesn't really allow the data to be interacted with very easily. Air gapped and putting your data in the side of a mountain, how do you use it? How do you have a database working with something that's air gapped? And then immutable is just storing a lot of information, right? And just writing it and never allowing it to be rewritten or changed, which isn't really practical.
So you mentioned the idea of the education would be good. Getting attention is hard as well. What things are you doing right now to get attention for what you're doing?
Well, there's a lot of noise, right? And so we have a good solution for ransomware, and so does every other company that you ask, right? Everybody has a solution to ransomware, even though maybe it's not really a solution to ransomware. So cutting through the noise is really important, and we're challenged with that because there's a lot of buzzwords, there's a lot of new technology, there's a lot of flashing lights, and we're trying to just kind of come into the root cause and say this is what we do. We're trying to whittle our message down to the one thing and really simplify our messaging around the one thing. We think we have so many benefits that we bring that it's we're struggling to get that down into just the one statement or the one thing. But the team is working really hard on doing that now.
Yeah, I feel sometimes that you've got to take the 15 things and say, well, what's the level up or the level up from that? That would be a good way to summarize most of these things. And that's not easy to do, right? Because you want the input from the team, but everyone's got different opinions, and trying to get them all together can be tough at times.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's a necessary thing to kind of work through. And I have a great team, and we all see the top of Mount Everest, and we're all trying to figure out the best route to get up there. We all know that we have to be on the same route, so we're looking at the goal, we're looking at the end goal, and we're trying to figure out how to make that happen.
That's awesome. Let's talk about that then. What is the big vision for Calamu over the next 2 or 3 years?
So look, I mean, we have a big goal, probably, well beyond 2 or 3 years, but we have a big goal to protecting all data, right? So whether it's Calamu or a solution like Calamu, we think that this new concept of geo-dispersed, kind of the process that we're using, should be the de facto standard for primary storage. So that's really our big vision, is how do we have this apply to all data types? Today, unstructured data very well, but we know we need to move into, highly transactional databases and very fast moving data. And that's our big goal. Now, if we look at 2 to 3 years out, we want to kind of chip away at some of the major primary storage, not providers or solutions, but the way that they're architected, and we want to embed, and we want to complement, and we want to bring an additional benefit to some of those solutions. So that's kind of what we're focused on with some of our partnerships for the next maybe 2 to 3 years.
I love that big vision. You and I are aligned on the importance of doing it actually at the data level, and the idea is that in trying to protect data, it seems like the industry has done everything except for protect the data. It's like how close can we get to it without actually touching it? Because it's a little bit scared of doing it, right? But having the awareness and also the chops to be able to pull this off is going to be huge. Paul, I really enjoyed the conversation today. If someone wants to continue talking to you, or they want to hit you up for potential jobs and things like that, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, certainly they can visit our website, which is www.calamu.com. It's Calamu. Or they can email me if they'd like to email me directly at plewis@calamu.com as well. I know
Well,
you've got you have a giant listenership, so I probably shouldn't have just given out that email address, but I try to respond to all of them. I'll try to
yeah, that's
respond to all
great.
of
I
them.
appreciate you doing that. Yeah, I truly enjoyed the conversation. You're in a great area. It's really, really compelling for a lot of people when they really think about alternatives the way they've been doing it for a while. And I wish you every success for 2023 and also for the early stage expo at RSA.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrew. Pleasure being here. Really enjoyed it.